Good morning, Wabash. Would all freshmen, both Greek and Independence, please stay after for a meeting with Dean Raiders? Giving today's chapel talk is Professor Brown. Professor Brown is an associate professor of physics at Wabash College, a graduate of Kalamazoo College and the University of Michigan. Throughout his career, he has been interested in both physics and the impact of science research on education and policy. One of his most successful fusions of these interests has been the Molecular Neutron Array Project. With the help of the National Science Foundation funding, we've been able to forge a collaboration of 9 colleges and universities, build a large detector array for nuclear physics, and involve over 24 undergraduates in the process, all while turning out significant nuclear science results and publications. He has also served as the director of this collaboration and served as a department chair at Millikan University and Wabash College. Giving his talk titled The Large and Small of It, Dr. James Brown.
Thank you. First, I would like to express my thanks to the Sphinx Club for the distinct honor of speaking with you today. I'm mindful of the many far greater men and women who have spoken from this podium and the talks that they have given, many enlightening, a few calls to action, and each a unique reflection of the speaker and his or her vision of Wabash College or the broader world beyond our Georgian halls. I hope you find these words to your liking, and I hope that at least you will leave here more refreshed, perhaps from a good nap. I am by training a nuclear physicist, trained to understand those things that we can never see, things evidenced only by ephemeral pulses of electrical current or flashes of light too faint for the eye to perceive. And for these events, we as physicists seek the simplest of causes. We assume that nature has a rather few essentially understandable relationships, and that they are enough to build the complexity of matter, both observed and as yet unobserved. This view is a great part of the perspective that shapes my vision. So if you ask me why we chose to study physics, I can honestly answer that it held for me the promise of explaining the most with the least. It is the tradition in these chapel talks to dispense pearls of wisdom, to wax philosophical on the value of the liberal arts, or the importance of the examined life. But I find this is not where my strengths lie. Not that I don't appreciate our core mission, not that I don't examine my life and my actions, but rather I found that wisdom is best learned through experience. And it is the one thing that only you can give yourself. We as professors cannot do that for you. So the best I can do for you this morning is to share a few things that I've learned over the years, and you can do with them what you wish. So let me start with the topic of this talk, the large and the small of it, a title chosen not only for its utility in appeasing Mr. Lutz, but also helpful to me personally as a vague answer to the question that I am sure is now crossing your mind. What the hell are we doing here? And that is the question that faced me as I stared blankly at a screen for many days over the past weeks. At first glance, we are engaged in a ritual, one in which an elder and experienced member of the tribe either entertains the more useful members or is subject to some form of public humiliation. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm at Wabash teaching physics because it combines many of the best aspects of the life that I desired as a youth and a young man. I've always enjoyed puzzles and games, and science still holds innumerable puzzles. Physics has provided a way for me to find out about the universe, to explain the complex with the simple. If you hold your hands about a foot apart, then the light would take about a billionth of a second to travel that distance. If all 7 billion people on the planet held their hands that far apart and cut a stick, we could lay those sticks end to end together. And that stick would extend 7 light seconds into space. That passes the moon, but reaches only a tenth of the distance to the sun, and a millionth of the distance to the nearest star, which, by the way, was only this year discovered to have planets around it. But the objects that I study in my research are a million billion times smaller than that distance between your hands. And some live for less than a billionth of a second that gap is supposed to represent. And we routinely record time to a precision 10 times smaller than that billionth of a second. Yet many of these particles have played important roles in the broad sweep of time that has brought us to this moment. Beryllium-7, with its long half-life of 53 days, was one of the few routes to form much of the lithium, beryllium, boron in the primordial nucleosynthesis that followed the first few minutes after the universe was born. These elements are rare on Earth and in the cosmos, yet they are critically important today. And the lithium that we mine from the deserts of Bolivia and make into batteries and medicines was not made in stars. It was for the vastly greatest part made 14 billion years ago, 9 billion years before the sun and the Earth. If you've taken Professor Warner's world history course, you will recognize this as the starting point of big history. Well, some millions of years after the lithium was made, stars began to form, to grow old, and to die. Some of these stars processed primordial hydrogen and helium into all the heavier elements you know today. The remarkable thing is not that this happened, but rather that it can all be described in relative detail by the careful application of just a few general theories in physics: quantum mechanics, gravitation, statistical mechanics, and nuclear physics. And in my scientific life, this is what I mean by the large and the small of it. A careful examination of the rules governing the interactions and relationships of the smallest objects in the universe can lead to an understanding of the whole. But the laws of physics are not the only example of relationships that are important in life or in science. When I left the small college that I attended, I had been able to spend 6 months studying and traveling in Europe, 3 months working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, and 3 months at Argonne National Labs. Each of these experiences was made possible to varying degrees by relationships with faculty and the generosity of alumni and friends of the college. And the relationships forged in those experiences led me for a brief time to a staff position at the Jet Propulsion Lab and then on to graduate school. So make friends with Scott Crawford and his staff. But most recently, my research has turned to the study of very neutron-rich nuclei, like the oxygen isotopes of masses 23, 24, 25, and 26, an endeavor that takes significant resources. I've been blessed to be part of a phenomenal collaboration between 10 small colleges and 2 smaller universities and 2 major research institutions. And thanks to the work of Brad Vest, Ben Foster, Logan Rice, and John Wong, and with funding from each of you through the National Science Foundation, we have recently doubled the size of our detector array. In science, as in most endeavors, the days where a single person working alone can make significant progress are long past. By now, more than 100 students across the represented campuses have participated in the project. We have been the first in the world to experimentally characterize several nuclei. We have shown that the so-called magic numbers that define the combinations of neutrons and protons, which will make the most stable nuclei, actually change when the numbers of neutrons and protons are vastly different. My colleagues are wonderful and creative people, and like my faculty friends and students here, I draw joy and strength from them. And sometimes, small results can change long-held theories. Let me step back now and address some of the best advice I ever heard. Learn to be comfortable with uncertainty, to plan, and yet to take joy in the unexpected. For the only thing that is certain in what you are about to do is that it will not turn out as you expected. I'm paraphrasing Professor Joe Fugate, who gathered a class of rising juniors together in a chapel not unlike this one and sent us on our way, some to Europe, some to Africa, a few to South America and to Asia, but nearly each and every one away. Those words would resonate through some adventures that year, but for me, they echo still. I learned to accept the uncertain and tentative nature of knowledge, be it scientific or otherwise. I learned to try new things and to be willing to make a fool of myself, invaluable skills in this profession. There are stories to tell, but perhaps this is not the venue. My favorite involves the sound of music, drinking with Aussies, and learning what your shellmate means, and an abandoned VW Beetle in Rome, things that do not seem related, yet are. So enjoy the small things. They are part of a larger whole. So take the chance to step beyond your comfort zone. Try something you might not have. Give up wrestling to try rugby. Go to a men's college 2,000 miles from home. Pick up a javelin. Vow to get all your homework in on time. Take a class with an immersion trip. I've tried many things. And like Edison said regarding invention, I have not failed 10,000 times. I have successfully found 10,000 ways that will not work. I have taken chances in my career. I left a tenured position to come here. I took a 30% pay cut to begin teaching. And yes, each year I invent several ways to fail to teach, and 1 or 2 ways to teach. I've taught outside my discipline in EQ with esteemed colleagues and friends. I'm grateful to Professors Warner and Rogers and Trustee Emeritus David Orr and the college for the opportunity to twice teach and to learn about the archaeoastronomy of the Maya, and to travel to the state of Chiapas, Mexico. With 15 students, we were able to visit 3 major Mayan centers, 2 minor ones, visit living indigenous communities, hike through the jungle, swim in beautiful free-flowing rivers and waterfalls, all with the help of Professor Warner's friends at the Mayan Exploration Center and through the generosity of alumni of this college. This is something that was made all the more possible by the relationships that make Wabash a special college. And no, I won't go so far as to call it unique. There are many colleges in this uniquely American tradition of the residential liberal arts college where these things can and do happen. And here is where we sometimes fall into the trap of ignoring the large for the small. Being a physicist, and particularly nerdy, there's an analogy that I particularly enjoy. But first, I must make a brief digression into a bit of Wabash lore. As this semester draws to a close, seniors will begin to live in some dread of that most fearsome of Wabash traditions, oral comps. A tradition carried out quietly behind closed doors, rather than in public and before your peers at some other institutions. So, it could be worse. There's a retired member of the faculty that used to ask each and every student to explain the second law of thermodynamics to his committee, whether the student was a science major or not. With that picture held firmly in your mind, consider this analogy. Entropy is the one thing that always increases, or at best stays the same, in any process. It is a measure of the disorder of things. If a cold object comes into contact with a hotter one, they will exchange thermal energy until the entropy of the combination is maximized. The analogy is this. When 2 people interact, they will exchange goods, money, perhaps words, in ways that make both happier. I get rid of my excess corn. You are happy to have something to eat, but fewer dollars. Your money makes me happier than my corn did, and eating it makes you happier. So ideally, money should always be exchanged until happiness is maximized. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite seem to work that way, but there's some truth in it. I once spent a long car trip to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, on a way to review a science semester program, discussing with a colleague whether we each should pursue happiness in life or if all life is suffering. We never did decide that one. But I can tell you one kind of suffering. It's trying to find a good cup of coffee at a gas station in Tennessee. It turns out, Terrence is mad that I'm busting on his home state. Oh well. All right, let's see. It turns out long philosophical discussions on the meaning we give to life are not my thing. Note that I did not say the meaning of life, but rather the meaning we give to it, which brings me back to the question of ritual, and that peculiar one that we are performing now. We have our rituals at Wabash, and many of them seem inviolate, permanent, yet unlike natural laws, they're actually mutable, changing, and even fickle. Professor Abbott assures me that when he was a student here, no one feared walking under the arch, and that having done so, he was not struck by lightning, nor to my knowledge did he fail comps. Rituals are important. They are how we agree to signify important turnings in our lives and relationships: graduation, marriage, birth, death, and remembrance. Yet their only meaning is what we give them. And here is where we get back to the large and the small of it. When the college was hit with a declining endowment and a smaller teaching staff, we gathered together as faculty, students, and administrators to craft a new course and to place it in the freshman year, replacing a long-standing course in the sophomore year that itself had replaced a yet earlier course. Some of you experienced that earlier course, and many of you the newer. Some of you even hated a reading or two. Exactly. You should be uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable if you are learning. The skill of the lifelong learner is to hear the unfamiliar voice and perhaps to find in it the new or perhaps even the common. We are best when we work together and when we recognize and adapt to change. Of this I am certain. The best way to live has not been found, but today is better than yesterday. At its foundation, science has this capacity. Each new discovery either reinforces or upends a previous theory, and the relative strength of our understanding comes from nature's simplicity and repeatability. Yet even in completely deterministic systems, paths can diverge quickly. Something you should ask our physics students about in the advanced lab course. And little works without a team behind it. From our mission statement, you are called to leadership. But what nature of leadership? From time to time, the image of a city shining on a hill has been invoked to imagine our exceptionalism. Let me remind you that before those words became a ritual invocation by an esteemed former president, they came from a deep tradition, first from the parable of the salt and the light from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and then from John Winthrop's sermon in 1630, celebrating the arrival of the Massachusetts Bay colonists. So allow me the permission to quote a bit. To avoid this shipwreck, and to provide for our prosperity, and to follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. For this end, we must be knit together in this work as one man. We must entertain each other in brotherly affection. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities. We must uphold a familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and our community in the work, our community as members of the same body. So shall we keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. The Lord will be our God and delight to dwell among us. So let me ask this of you. Honor the small things, the joys of college days, your relationships, your passions, your loves, but examine them in the larger picture. As President White is fond to quote, "In dreams begin responsibility." With your dreams, hopes, and aspirations, there will always come a duty. Duties to each other, to our communities, and to the larger world. So let me swing back to the question, what are we doing here? Well, we profess to teach and to learn clear relationships between force, mass, and acceleration, between supply, demand, and price, and likewise between the thornier issues, good and evil, rights and obligations. But often things are more subtle. Learning without teaching, and teaching without learning. College, it turns out, is a messy business of not only growing older, but becoming the responsible citizen that our one rule asks you to be. I hope that what we are doing here is seeking truth in the noblest traditions of the liberal arts, and that we use our rituals to that end, that we examine our passions and beliefs, and that we live lives filled with rich and varied relationships, both professional and personal. So let me make one request of you before we meet again in this space to celebrate our coming contest with the paw. Let me cite a quote from the suffrage leader, Carrie Chapman Catt. "Democracy is not a spectator sport. Exercise your right and go vote." Thank you, Wabash.
All right, just a few brief announcements. Friday, swimming and diving will be at Rose-Hulman. Saturday, football is here versus Oberlin. Today kicks off Novemeber, so please grow out your facial hair and mustaches. We will be having the Monon mustache competition as well. Remember, all freshmen come down and meet afterwards with Dean Raiders and myself, and please rise and sing Old Wabash. Da-da-da.